Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our May Policy Leadership Group meeting. As you see, we have a full agenda today. Our first agenda item is at our last meeting, Mr. Merrill presented an overview of the project, and y'all requested that he do that in every meeting for everyone's benefit, including the audience. So we'll ask him to do that now. Will, Mike?
And while we're waiting for Mr. Merrill, Herb, we do have a memo from
Sure.
Commissioner Miller. Please be advised that due to a prior commitment out of town, I will not be in attendance at the Wednesday, May 28th workshop. Please read the reason for my absence into the record.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So Herb had just asked me to give everyone kind of a lay of the land, where we've been, where we're going. But I think it's important to note that we've reached an important milestone. And the good news is there's fewer meetings ahead. I know that'll keep you all coming back. But next month, in June, we're going to be asking you to consider a draft business plan. It's draft because we want to have a public engagement process to get input. But the business plan will have proposed projects, many of the ones that we've been presenting, proposed funding, and proposed governance solutions. And we want to take that out in a rigorous, formal public engagement process with all the bells and whistles that we need to do. But I think it's also important to note that all the work that you've been doing in this engagement has really been truly a landmark process. First time unprecedented engagement by all of our elected leaders from the very beginning. But that was really necessary because of the importance of what we're dealing with. So you all took a risk in this process. I'm sure when you first showed up, you thought, what am I getting into here? What did Merrill get me into this time? But I appreciate, and we all appreciate you trusting us to get you through this process. And I think we are at an important point here. You know, some have said the process has taken too long. Others feel there's too little transit. There's too many road projects. Why are we focusing on key economic spaces? But while that I want to validate those feelings, I also want to say that, you know, the process takes as long as it needs to take. And we've had a lot of engagement at different levels from all of your staff looking at specific projects. Any citizen who wants to see what's behind this and the details can go there. That was a piece that was missing last time. The biggest criticism last time is, where's the plan, where's the detail? There's plenty of detail, and it's all transparent. And there's really no right or wrong way to do this. I think that's probably the most important thing. Anybody who thinks that they have the answer truly doesn't. I know that I don't. But the only thing that I know is that to not have gone through this process would have been a failure. And to not act and do what we're doing would have been the failure. So not every constituent needs or wants big transportation projects. We heard that when we went around in the community early on this year. And so what we've been trying to recommend is a balanced diet of transportation solutions. And that includes intersections, intelligent traffic management solutions, bus rapid transit, circulator buses, water ferries, road expansions, and rail. So that there's a balanced approach to get everyone a little bit of something that they need. And the one thing that we did hear loud and clear is that if folks are going to pay for something, they want to be able to use it soon. Some even said jokingly before they die. But I think that's, they were serious. I mean, what are the things that are going to impact their lives in the short run? And so I think that really two important things have happened along the way, and that would be the detailed evaluation of projects and a more transparent and constructive dialogue on this subject in this community than I've seen in 25 years. I think we have more people engaged. There's more good dialogue. There isn't screaming and shouting. There isn't any of that. I think it's really a healthy dialogue, which is good. So the decisions that you're going to make in June about projects, funding, and governance are really not the end. It's really the beginning of the next phase of this thing. And that gets us into governance, and that's why governance is so important, and that's why having a solid governance plan is so important, because the way that you hand this off to an implementing agency is going to be critical to the success. And that's why I believe that you all, this body, needs to serve as the board of directors of whatever the agency is that takes the ball and moves it down the road. I think that will give residents comfort of accountability as we talk about potential funding, potential sales tax referenda, and other solutions. It ensures continuity of your vision, and it simply is, I think, the way that this should be done, and that will be up to you, and it'll be up to further discussion. So going forward today, you're going to hear a description of the final key economic spaces. Gene Duncan from the city is going to present the city's projects, and Lucia Garces will present the remainder of the other projects. You'll also hear the results of the recent Consumer Transportation Survey, which was, I think, very encouraging, and that I think it really supported where we're headed here. It was a high level, but yet it was important, and I think that's good. Then, July through September, we'll be taking that draft business plan I talked about out to the public in a really thorough, rigid engagement process to get input. Certainly there will be suggested changes. That's why it's draft. And we want folks to understand they have a voice in this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gene Duncan from the city, or Lucia, whoever is going to go first. Lucia.
Good afternoon. Like we've done at all of the other meetings, we're just going to refresh for you and the viewing public what we're considering as we talk about these transportation projects and the pieces that we're layering to get us to the, as Mike called, the balanced solution or the balanced diet. What's really important to remember is that this is about economic development and creating jobs. And so we start with a basis of where are those jobs that are considered our targeted industries. And then we look at those, and we've identified those as key economic spaces, and you've gone through a number of them. You've looked at Brandon, you've looked at Port Red Wing, you've looked at the USF area. And this now concludes the last package of the key economic space discussions. And today we'll talk about the area north of the airport, Anderson Road, we're going to call it. And then Gene Duncan will talk about West Shore and the downtown. And what will be very important is we see on this graphic that we're talking about transportation, and then we're talking about the land use component. So we're bringing together the jobs, the transportation, and the land use component. What will be interesting in the city's presentation is you will see how far that conversation has gone, whether we're looking at the Envision project or we're looking at West Shore. There has been a lot of studying and looking at the relationship between jobs and transportation and the land uses. So we're looking at, again, the land uses. We're talking about a transportation infrastructure that's reliable, and it connects in various different ways within the key economic spaces and the economic spaces themselves so that we can improve the market access. Again, we rely on what we're calling the spine and the spine network. And so if you think of your body, the spine being all of those things that are identified by the state's intermodal system. So it includes the airport, the interstate systems, the port, some of the rail lines, and some major roads. And we call the spine network then the rest of the bones that connect and lead us to the spine itself so that we are able to provide access. These are the economic spaces that you've already looked at, and the one we're going to talk about today is the one with TIA, Anderson Road, downtown West Shore. That will then conclude the presentation of each of the economic spaces, projects within those. And then remember, at some point, we're also adding the competitive sites to this to make sure that we're accessing competitive sites in a way that will allow for additional job growth. Just a reminder, these are all the different areas that we looked at. And this is the TIA Anderson Road. Really from the north part of the airport, if you look at this, with Linebaugh Avenue on the very north. And this area includes the community plans of Town and Country and Egypt Lake. And I think for the part in unincorporated Hillsborough, what's really important is that our staffs have gone back and looked at not just the projects that have been identified for mobility, but also projects that have been identified in various community plans that communities are seeking that also meet the criteria of improving mobility. These are the various land uses. I think what's important here, the big blue space is the airport, so there is a huge institutional component here. The gray to the north identifies industrial areas, but this area is fairly well mixed because they're industrial as well as office commercial. So I think really unlike any other area, this will, when you see the jobs, you'll see how diverse this area really is, and then what improvements we need to make to continue allowing it to be the kind of economic center that it currently is. So we presented the employee kind of a sample of those industries that meet our target industry screening criteria. And what's really interesting about this one is if you look, you will see EQ Solutions, HCA employees, Wells Fargo, Travelers. These are back office space or off medical support functions. But what's also interesting, if you look at Tampa Brass and Aluminum, and then you look at the electric supply of Tampa, those are old, historic, family-owned industrial uses in this area. And somebody brought to the attention that electric supply is one of the key providers of good. They are a very good employer and have won awards for being a good employer in the Tampa area. So you see that, I mean, this is over 2,000 some odd jobs that just from this sample, but it is very diverse. And so when an area is this diverse, you really want to make sure that you provide for various modes of transportation in and out of it. So the improvements that you see here really do then support the improvements to making the Anderson Road area viable and continuing to be viable. The area north of Hillsborough, from north of Hillsborough to Linebaugh, is the expansion of Anderson Road. It's currently a 4-lane road, and so the recommendation here is to make it a 6-lane road. Interestingly, too, the other east-west piece, which is Sly Avenue, there are recommendations to improve that from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So you create this cross between the north-south piece and the east-west piece that's serving directly that Anderson area that we just talked about that's very diverse. Dale Mabry includes a number of ATMS projects and other mobility, perhaps turn lane projects and turn lanes that you might see on the dots on that page. And then the other improvements to Waters Avenue, those really come from some of the pedestrian safety improvements that the MPO has recommended to us. So you see a variety of projects that are intended to provide additional access to this area. In the past, what we have done is we've brought to you also the transit component. What are the transit components that feed this? And so in this particular set of discussions, whether we're talking about Anderson, West Shore, or downtown, what we'd like to do is reserve the conversation about transit for the next meeting where we will have a broader conversation of transit. There absolutely improved bus service in this area, but kind of what becomes very important is the connections between and among these areas, and so we think those need to be addressed as part of the broader package. And it's just, we don't have the slide, but if just considering with these improvements, without these improvements, the deterioration of the traffic will increase by about 18%. With these improvements, it will be about 12%. So these improvements do create relief, and as we have identified in some of the other areas as well, it is what level of deterioration that happens. We're reducing the level of deterioration. So those are the thoughts on Anderson. I think Gene Duncan has a really cool presentation, and you'll really see how.
Before you leave, let's see if there are any questions of you. So, Commissioner Murray.
I would just like to ask if you could also look at Benjamin Road. We're working a lot with the manufacturers. As you know, we've rolled out quite a few initiatives on the commission to try and increase the number of companies in this area. There are quite a few along Benjamin right now. That is a precarious road to drive down, and there are many, many employees. I would like for you to take a look at that and see about increasing that from 2 to 4 lanes. I think it would help also with luring more businesses. It's a great location because they can hop right on the Veterans and go to the airport or wherever their need. But there's some very high level. Toledo is there. That other one, IFA, I think the aeronautics manufacturer is there. Quite a few.
Okay.
Thank you.
And an area that is really poised to serve the airport industry. So anything that has to be transported by air is just a drive across Hillsborough. And with the improvements that have been made to Air Cargo Road, I think it really does then match up, whether it's Anderson or Benjamin.
Okay. Any other comments or questions of Lucia? Okay, thank you, Lucia. Gene?
Thank you
Gene's
so
handout in
much.
there, so.
Yes, I'd just like to draw attention to your packet. It's got our actual list of projects attached to the back. But rather than just go through that list one by one, I thought it would be most beneficial to give you some planning framework around which these projects were developed. And then you can get a better sense of collectively what these projects are going to do to create the vision that we have in the city of Tampa. And I appreciate Lucia mentioning the word cool, because we do feel that we have a cool and hip city, and we want to keep heading in that direction. We certainly have a good leader to take us there.
I was going to say, you certainly have a cool and hip mayor. So.
My 8-year-old thinks I'm a doofus.
So I don't think there's much debate on, when we were coming up with our key economic spaces, that the downtown would certainly fit into that category. Don't think we need to go into a large explanation about that. Do want to point out, though, that in the past, the old model of a downtown central business district was how we got started in our downtown area, and we certainly feel that that needs to be refreshed. And about 3 years ago, when our mayor took office, we launched the Envision Plan for the city of Tampa, and that essentially expanded what we are now calling our downtown, and taking advantage of the areas around that central business district and recreating the downtown to be a multimodal, multi-faceted downtown with residential, retail, commercial, and business, and not just that old central business district model. The other thing that this planning has done is it's recognized a jewel that we have in our midst, which is the Hillsborough River. It's a natural resource which we want to take better advantage of. We've done somewhat of a good job on the east side with a Riverwalk and other developments, but under Mayor Buckhorn's plan, it's time to take advantage of the west side of the river and really make the river the center of our city. So just wanted to share a little bit with you about the Envision Plan for the city of Tampa, which again, it's very advantageous that we're having this exercise with the Policy Leadership Group, because a lot of the planning that's been done recently was actually started in the city a few years ago. And so we're really in a really good position to share some projects with you that we think could go forward collectively and really support the vision that we have. So just to take a moment to look at this slide, the Envision Tampa City Center Plan is basically a master plan that's creating a vision for our future, and it's recognizing our city as a vibrant, livable, and a sustainable community depends upon connecting its people, redefining its places, and igniting progress. And I do want to say that it's not something that we're looking forward at, it's something that's already occurring. Anyone that comes to the downtown after hours or on the weekends can see the evidence that the plan has already kicked in. There's activities going on, there's events going on. People are drawn to the downtown unlike never before, and that's certainly translating into economic development currently, and we want to continue on that path. The vision for this plan, as you can see there, a community of livable places, connected people, and collaborative processes that embraces and celebrates its river and waterfront. And just want to take a moment to share those building blocks that were identified with our planning that are going to support that vision to come to full fruition. That first building block that we have in our plan is a reimagined and refocused river and waterfront. And as you can see from the top and bottom pictures, if there's a focus on these things and specific projects in place to address the changes we want to make, we can really do some transforming in our downtown. Second building block, strong and livable center city neighborhoods. The streets are the fabric of our neighborhoods, and the treatment of that public realm is very important in creating a certain ambiance, a certain feel, and certain development that wants to draw to those areas. And so that's another important building block that's essential to our Envision plan. Building block number 3, a downtown core with a vital mix of uses, and again, a strong pedestrian environment. That pedestrian environment is key to creating a space where people want to be, where they're safe, and where they can travel efficiently and safely as well. Building block number 4, livable transportation connections between neighborhoods and downtown. It's not only important to connect within an area or around a development that's coming in, but also connecting from point to point. So as people traverse from one place to the other, they're in a different sense of a place, they're in a safe environment, and again, development will come along that's going to complement that as well. Building block number 5, mixed-use places built in a form that supports transit. So as Lucy mentioned, we are going to focus on transit specifically next month, but we're recognizing that it's a chicken and the egg. If we don't have the density, if we don't have the proper development planning, then we can't create the kind of transportation system that we need to support all the people that we want to come live, work, and play in our downtown area. I'll just mention again on this very important slide that, again, there's strategic planning and there's methodology behind the Envision plan that started 3 years ago, and our projects are an offshoot of that. The bottom of the slide are specific forward moves that have been identified. Half of those are actual transportation-related forward moves that, as each of those are applied and implemented, those are supporting one of the building blocks, which is essential to the vision that we've started to create and we want to continue to create. So again, wanting to frame the projects that we're presenting to you just so you can see how collectively those are creating a transformation of our downtown. I also want to point out that within the planning of this Envision plan, that different streets are recognized to have different functions. And that's very important because that relates to how we're going to leverage our resources and how we are going to review developments that come in so they can continue to complement the kind of hierarchy we want to have in our streets, and we can make sure our projects that go in, capital projects, are reflecting that hierarchy that we're envisioning for our downtown. Just want to take a moment to mention Complete Streets. Complete Streets is one of our very important optimization strategies that we've presented to you previously. That term is used quite a bit, and it's been rather in vogue for a few years now. But just to cover a few of the basics, there are a number of different components that make up a street. You can see they're on the slide. Trees, lighting, sometimes there's furniture, there's the width of the travel lane, there's the surface of the road. And so depending on the purpose or the hierarchy that's envisioned for a street, we would select different components of these and create that street so that it's functioned in the best possible manner. We've gotten to the point with our downtown, with West Shore, and with many places in our city that we're not just going to continue to go out and widen roads, add more cars, and not really have any direction of where we're going with all that. We want to utilize the existing infrastructure we have to the best extent possible And if we can be thoughtful and have a methodology of how we are planning our streets and building our streets with specific components, then we're going to get the best bang for our buck, so to speak. So at this point, I just wanted to point out some of our key projects. I'm not going to again go through every single project on the list, which is at the back of your packet, but just want to point out several projects. This graphic shows those orange corridors that I just want to mention briefly, so you can get a sense of how, again, collectively these projects are creating the vision of which we've been planning for a few years now. Our first project is the Cass Tyler two-way project in the downtown area, basically from the river over to about Jefferson. This was an important project in our Envision plan because it's a strong link between the Encore development and the river and the river walk. This project is going to create a two-way opportunity within the downtown rather than that one-way pair that exists now. And that definitely is going to translate to more space that could be used for different amenities, different multimodal treatments, and different developments that are going to come in and enjoy that two-way traffic pattern now.
That's how we get the room to do that, Strauss.
Another key project is what we call the East-West Green Spine. This project is basically a multimodal trail that will connect from the North Hyde Park area over to VM Ybor. Portions will have a separated two-way cycle track. And we feel that this is going to really draw a lot of interest and create a unique characteristic for our downtown and could potentially be somewhat of a tourism draw as folks want to come down and experience a downtown cycling opportunity. It's also going to better utilize an existing resource, for example, the Nucio Parkway. If any of you have been out there at any time of day, you could probably lay down on one side of the street and not be bothered by traffic because there's excess capacity just sitting out there, and there's a lot better usage that we could put into place with that corridor that currently exists. That's also going to translate to different development interests. Again, economic development is at the heart of all these projects. Wanted to mention our Green Artery Perimeter Trail. This started as a grassroots movement. The interest grew. It spread amongst about 20 neighborhoods. And the city actually took a closer look at it under our Walk Bike 3 plan that we did. And we are already looking and adding some more pieces of that. The solid lines are new pieces that would come along within the list that you have there in your packet. The dotted lines currently exist, and we envision in the future as more components come along, there'll be some wayfinding, some branding, and this will become another corridor that will be available for cycling, walking, and other multimodal opportunity within our city. The Tampa, Florida two-way was another important forward move in our planning list, and we're certainly looking forward to coordinating with the Department of Transportation to see what the opportunities are to provide for a two-way Florida and a two-way Tampa. That will allow us to have that extra roadway capacity that's not being used, again, to provide for other modes, to create a better public realm, and certainly a safer public realm as well. Willow Avenue is another key project on the west side of our downtown. You can see before and after. If we put in streetscape, we've got a number of streetscape projects on our list. Projects like this can make a corridor transform 180 degrees. I just want to point out another aspect of the streetscaping. If you notice where the tree is in the center of the slide, there's a curb that goes out. That's what we call a bulb out. Those bulb outs are typically placed at intersections. And what those do is, besides the landscaping and the traffic calming that comes from that landscaping, it narrows the crossway for the pedestrians to cross over, so it's a safer crossing. They have a refuge on either side, and it also creates an insect parking opportunity. Again, better for retail, better for development, safer for pedestrians because it calms the traffic. Heading a little further to the west towards Howard Avenue, another very key corridor. We've done some incremental projects out there with a mid-block crossing that's going on by the Epicurean Restaurant. We've got the Howard Swan intersection with development occurring there. We're looking to see what we can do in the interim to try to ease congestion issues. But we want to take a comprehensive look of that corridor all the way from Bay Shore to Kennedy to see comprehensively what we can do to add safety, to manage the congestion the best that we can, and also to give a better pedestrian experience, because we have so many folks, particularly on the weekends, the evenings, using that corridor. I see them all the time, just sheet flowing mid-block. And we really need to have some safer things in place to address that corridor, particularly when there's alcohol involved. The Cass Willow connector on the west side of the river as well. We see this as another potential corridor that could certainly ease traffic issues on North Boulevard, could encourage more traffic to utilize the Cass Street Bridge that would take the load off of Ashley and take the load off of Kennedy Boulevard. Ashley is one of those streets that it's on one hand a major connector to the interstate, but on the other hand, it's in between our beautiful Curtis Hickson Park, our Zach Street, Promenade of the Arts, and other developments. And so we're trying to find a better balance for Ashley so we can have a more pedestrian-friendly Ashley corridor, and this particular project could help that if we can get some of the southbound Ashley traffic heading over onto the Cass Street Bridge and heading over toward the west from that direction. ATMS, Advanced Traffic Management System. This is a very critical project for the downtown and the West Shore, and actually for the entire city of Tampa and beyond. I know Hillsborough County has ATMS on their particular list of projects. City of Tampa certainly has it as well. Just want to take a moment. This could really be a whole separate PowerPoint because it's quite complex, but very quickly, just want to take a moment to explain a little bit what that actually is. It's basically a set of different pieces of equipment, traffic signals, fiber in the ground, unfortunately very old copper in the ground, cabinets. We see the cabinets out that Downtown Partnerships likes to paint and make a little more beautiful out there than that ugly silver color. Controllers, wireless radios, dynamic message signs. All of these pieces put together create the Advanced Traffic Management System, which is very critical to manage the traffic flow within our city and beyond. Within the city of Tampa, we have a very, very old system. Someone was equating it recently to a cassette tape, and we're now at the apps on the iPhone level. So we have a very old system that's very fragile. It's not very well supported by our vendor. The traffic signals do not communicate with each other. We only know if there's a problem if someone calls us and complains, and we have to run out and look at it. It's a very limited system, and we don't have very good communication amongst our partners with Hillsborough County, Pinellas County. Very serious need that we have. The benefit of the ATMS is we can optimize the roadways to flow the traffic in the manner that we want in terms of managing congestion, creating safety. If we don't have the best utilization of our existing infrastructure, then we're really not, we are, I don't want to say wasting our money, but we are putting good money after bad with the projects I just discussed if we can't manage the traffic on those roads in a responsible manner. So this is a very key aspect of our strategy, optimization strategies that we feel is very important. The other thing that it can do is it can help us with our special events. More and more we're having to staff our traffic management center with staff to sit and manually manipulate the green times. We can get the flows going in the way we want. When we have incoming forum traffic, outgoing Bucks traffic, we've got to manually manipulate all the time to make sure that's flowing properly. If we have incidents that occur, hurricanes, storms, this is going to be essential to maximizing that flow. And then moving forward, our bus rapid transit system that we currently have on Nebraska, that traffic signal prioritization system that is built into that is tied to our advanced traffic management system. So if this system is not working properly, the BRT is not working properly. And as we expand with other transit modes, rail, streetcar, whatever other modes we continue to explore and build upon, it's going to be critical to have this advanced traffic management system robust and working for us. I'll move over to our West Shore
Let me ask you to
area.
pause. Any questions about downtown before Jean
Oh, I'm
goes to West
sorry.
Shore?
Okay,
Remember?
Sorry. Howard Avenue.
yes.
There have been comments, a lot of comments from people in the community that would like to see that change from a 2-lane to a 4-lane road to, or whatever. It just to help move traffic north and south in a better, faster way. And I think Harry Cohen and I both agreed that something needs to give here. We've got to have, we have east-west, but we don't really have a solid north-south major road to take people and divert them. Actually, it'd be another option for Dale Mabry or McDill. McDill is 4-lane also. So I'm giving you some comments I hear from constituents that they would like to see improvements made to Howard. I think it would be safer. I think you can make an intersection improvement, but I think you're still going to have serious traffic issues if we don't do something about the number of lanes that people can drive through. It's just there are too many people living there, too much business. Hospital is improving. I mean, I could go through the list. There are banks, numbers of banks, the grocery stores. You know, it just, something's got to give. And I'm putting in a plug to really do something to improve the flow on Howard Avenue.
Commissioner Chris?
Thank you. I'm going to, I guess, direct this to the mayor since you're the CEO. You know, it wasn't until I was elected to the commission that I had a chance to work downtown on a consistent basis. I'd come down here to service clients, but not come down here on a daily basis, you know, 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 or 8 to 8. And I got to tell you, I thoroughly enjoy working in this environment of energy down here. And one of the things that I like about it is the walkability. When you're working in the suburbs, you've got to drive everywhere. Here you can park the car and you can walk. And having enjoyed cities like Portland, Philadelphia, and others who have cultivated walkable downtown districts, every day I go to lunch, I walk across a parking lot that's owned by the city. And I look at this parking lot, and it's in line with 2 parks, the county park, the Chalura Park, and with Gaslight Park. It's halfway in between the two. And I wonder why that we haven't looked at the option of creating an arts park there in front of the SunTrust building. And the reason I mention that is when the city of Hollywood, Florida, did that, and they started centralizing arts projects that would normally be located in buildings because of the percentage of the costs that they have to put towards, you know, creative opportunities. They started centralizing it in an area of the city where they began to build critical mass. Now they have venues where performers actually do things outside among the arts projects, and they've created a strong enough critical mass where they've got redevelopment all around it. Restaurants, condominiums, apartments, businesses, and it's incredible what they've been able to do. And that just seems so ripe for that. And when I look at the Riverwalk, it's an L. You start at one end, you end at the other end. You know, when you look at Portland, Philadelphia, and the other walkable cities, even New Orleans, it's a circle or a square. You end up back where you started. And, you know, in looking at your plan here, I'm amazed and very impressed with the visioning. But I didn't see anything that dealt with, you know, what I just mentioned, and that's bringing the Riverwalk back to a loop and the option of possibly creating additional green usable space by looking at alternative use of that city parking lot.
Mayor?
Commissioner, all of which are good suggestions. I think the Riverwalk will be completed by December of this year, and we're already 90% done with the designs to take it from the Strass Center all the way up to North Boulevard. And I think you're absolutely right. I think to create that circle, if you will probably involve some form of transit, whether it's rubber-tired trolleys to connect the Riverwalk to other assets in the community. I think the city parking lot that we own is far more likely to be developed as either residential or office because it's at the corner of Main and Main. But I think there are other opportunities for green space. And I, like you, am a big believer in the retail orientation, the walkability, how the downtown feels at the street level, because people don't walk around looking up like this. They interact with what they see in front of them, whether it's a piece of public art that pops out unexpectedly, whether it's a performance, whether it's retail, whether it's planners, whether it's landscaping. That's what determines the quality of life of an urban environment. And so I think as we move through this process, you're going to see a lot more of that out of us. But I think that particular site, which is a city block, an entire city block that we own, would be more likely to be developed. Particularly if it's a residential site, you add, another 500 residents downtown, and then the retail follows, and you fill the retail in on the ground floor, and then you can do some of the amenities at the street level that are so important. But green space in an urban core is critically important. It absolutely is. It breaks up the monotony of the concrete and the monotony of the buildings. And great cities are known for, those little surprises that you see. I mean, the best example is Savannah. I mean, anybody who's been to Savannah has seen, that the way those parks are designed and all the units are developed around those individual parks. And it's not too late for us to do something similar. Yeah, good point, Seth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions about downtown? Okay, Jean, if you'll go ahead.
Okay, I'll move over to the West Shore area. West Shore, this is generally the boundary of the West Shore DRI, I believe, and I'm sure Ron Rotella could let me know. I believe that the West Shore DRI was the first area-wide DRI in the state of Florida. And one of the benefits that the DRI has enjoyed is the unity that they have through the West Shore Alliance. There's a lot of strength in numbers when you get a lot of businesses together and have a unified vision and have that vision as part of a city vision as well. So it's a very unique area. There's a lot of great bones in West Shore, as is we have in the downtown. Some key corridors that serve the area with the interstate and the veterans, the airport, and very strategically located to encourage great business development, and now heading towards more residential as we go into the future. West Shore as well has had a lot of planning that's been done in the past. That's certainly very positive in terms of having that in place to go forward with the opportunity for projects under this committee. West Shore does have a 25-year vision for the master plan area. And they've also got a pedestrian plan that was done some years ago, which has been blended into the city's walk-bike plan. So we're ensuring that any sub-plans that are going on, we are blending those into other plans that we have in the city to make sure that everything is connecting properly, and we are connecting with each other in such a manner that we're not overlapping our resources. Just want to mention some of the projects we have on our list for West Shore. And I do want to say there's currently a lot of investment going on in the West Shore area. We've got the I-275 design build project, which many of us are fully aware is underway, particularly with the Dale Mabry Lanes southbound closing this morning. We've got the huge investment of the airport that's going on with the People Mover just to the north. Other projects on the other side of the airport with Anderson Road, as Lucia mentioned. We've got the State Road 60 interchange on the horizon that the DOT is looking at, as well as future plans for Howard Franklin Bridge. So a lot of investment going on in the area, and we feel that our projects we've got on our list are going to complement those as well. So here's some of the key projects I just want to point out for West Shore. The first one I'll start it with is on the West Shore Boulevard itself. The city recently completed a feasibility study along West Shore, looked at transforming this corridor into a grand boulevard or a complete street, and you can see from the typical section there that there's going to be some lane reduction and wider sidewalks, amenities put in with a theme. This is complementary of the overlay that exists in West Shore for the development patterns, and certainly a great opportunity to create a better pedestrian opportunity for folks West Shore and Boy Scout are two of the corridors in the West Shore area that are looking at more pedestrian benefits as we have more shoppers, more visitors, and more lunchtime folks getting out and using those two corridors with the new developments that are going on. Another key project that we want to point out is Himes Avenue. Obviously, Himes is a very important corridor in terms of those that live and work there, but also those that are using that roadway to get to events such as those at the stadium. We were going through our information recently and realized that Himes Avenue has a very high fatality and crash rate, somewhat alarming actually, and so we put together a safety project. We're actually working with the DOT to get some kickstart funding for that, and we would certainly be looking for additional funding to come along to complete the project. We basically want to do some improvements in terms of landscape medians, adding some bicycle accommodations and safer crosswalks. This is going to reduce traffic conflicts, give more pedestrian refuge, and of course the landscaping is going to be an amenity that besides traffic calming is going to be a positive for the area in terms of economic development. Next projects that I'll mention are related to the future State Road 60 interchange project that is going to come along. There will be an opportunity under Occident and Trask Street to make some improvements to provide connections north-south on those two roadways and add to the grid system out in the West Shore area. Rio Street would be another one as well, but we understand that that'll be accommodated by the DOT's project on the interchange. So those are some key projects I want to mention in the West Shore area, and be glad to take any questions on West Shore that you might have.
Mr. Sharp?
I think that's incredibly impressive. First, I appreciate the presentation. It's an awful lot that you're bringing together.
Thank you for your time of giving me a little extra time to cover everything.
That was exciting. There was a lot of exciting activity. I wondered, would there be any issue or concern from either you or the mayor if we were to include the intermodal facility? You mentioned the people mover, and you talked about the rental car facility, and I know there's a lot of interest, even at the governor's level, of connecting in some fashion. Would, if we were to at least have this committee consider that intermodal facility, would that be something that would be of
Mr.
interest from the perspective of the mayor?
Yeah, I think it'd be something that, because and obviously everyone has seen that we put a rail project on this list. So no surprise to anybody. It's going to happen. We're going to get this done. That intermodal facility is awfully important as we look at the connection between the airport and downtown. And that wherever the intermodal facility ends up going, I think that's going to be critically important. And so I think we would be interested in pursuing that. Obviously, the state would have to be involved and others would have to be involved as well, but I'm not adverse to adding to that list of things that could be expenditures.
Any comments by any member of the policy group about that?
If I may just mention, we were planning for more of a focus on transit in our next workshop.
Right.
So we felt that maybe we would lay more of the specific pieces on the table for what exactly would we want to include in our plan. Obviously, as the mayor said, we've got mass transit rail on our list. But we could certainly look to see how specific we want to be with specific projects when we have our discussion on transit next month.
Just for the sake of the conversation, I want to not lose an opportunity to talk about that piece, because that piece then leads us to the downtown intermodal, and then when you've got those connections, it just changes the entire trajectory of where we're going. But we have to have that West Shore intermodal piece laid out, and so I just wanted to bring that up. I know that I've got a list from the West Shore group and I'm trying to compare, and I think you've done a very good job of, in your projects, kind of including many of what they have, but I just want to
Yes.
make sure that as we move forward, we continue to kind of, with the mayor's concurrence, just to kind of review, just to make sure that they have a chance to have their projects feed in. But they're smaller. Many of them are smaller. Is that fine with you, Mr. Mayor?
I'm familiar with that list.
Mr. Rentella.
Thank you.
Hold on. Mr. Rentella, yes, sir.
I really hadn't planned on making any comments today, but after a call from the Secretary of the Florida Transportation this morning, I thought I would share that conversation with you. Needless to say, Al Austin was working with the governor and the secretary on the intermodal facility for West Shore, so what I would like to do is pass this out. The secretary assured me, after we got through talking about the untimely death of Al, that they were going forward with the intermodal facility. Oh, you have any more? Pardon?
There's some coming around. Coming this way.
No, that's all I have. And if you look at that attachment on the second page, that's the intermodal facility that was constructed in Miami. And Miami basically did the same thing that's happening at the airport. Miami built a 6,000 space parking structure, connected that with the people mover system to the airport. That's what we're doing right now at Tampa International Airport. And then what Miami did is they extended their elevated people mover system from the parking structure to the multimodal facility. So we went from 22 sites in West Shore. I say we, all of us, the city, the county, the planning departments. We went from 22 sites to 4 sites. One site is West Shore Plaza. The other site is the back end of Al Austin's properties and Jefferson High School. And, and then the property between Cypress and the interstate. For your information, GE Capital called me. They just foreclosed on the DoubleTree, including the Charlie's Steakhouse. So they own it now. They don't want it. Talking to the secretary this morning, he indicated that the department, FDOT, will make a decision on which one of the 4 sites in June. So once they select the intermodal facility site, then the whole discussion is, how does it get financed, who buys it, who's going to lead the project. It's a major, major project. So again, what I did is I included, just for your reference, the costs associated with the Miami project, because it's somewhat similar to ours. And by the way, this has all been coordinated with the airport. They see their parking structure, extending their elevated people mover system to the new intermodal facility in West Shore. So regardless, when FDOT rebuilds the interstate, they leave 44 feet down the middle of the interstate, whether that's bus rapid transit or rail. Then they build a platform above the interstate just east of West Shore. So people coming from Pinellas, downtown, Gateway area, they get off at the platform. They connect to the intermodal facility. If they're going to the airport, they take the people mover system, and then there's a circulation system to move people around West Shore. So again, I was a little bit reluctant to discuss this, but because of the call from the secretary this morning, I thought it was timely.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may forget in this process, but last fall we did extensive public engagement, the managers, and we went around to various parts of the county, and that was our first phase where we had open meetings, a lot of folks come. In our last meeting, you requested we do a second phase, and so we did that survey. And as Mike Merrill said earlier, after we present the business plan next month, we'll go out to a further survey. But to give you the results of the most recent public engagement is Eric Johnson. So Eric.
Good afternoon. You should have 3 documents. The first one is this PowerPoint presentation that extracts some of the summary information on the survey. The second document is different in that it discusses the cross-tabulation so that you can get a perspective on some of the demographics and how they relate to the responses to the questions. And then the third document is an analysis document that was provided by our contractor, Florida Opinion Research. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. In terms of the survey, what I liked about this particular firm, and we'd had 6 firms recommended for consideration. We contacted all 6 of them. 3 responded. The firm, Florida Opinion Research, that we selected had the largest sample size, and so they did survey 1,100 county residents. They did first start by confirming whether the person answering the phone was age 18 or older, and if they were not, they thanked them and moved on. Because of the sample size, it reduced the margin of error to plus or minus 2.95%. All 3 of the firms that proposed indicated that based on current law, they needed to do a live phone survey. There had been some discussion, I think, at your last meeting about doing robocalls, but you can't do robocalls to someone that has a cell phone. That's against the law. So they all proposed live surveys, which we did. It was available in English or Spanish. It was conducted over the period May 4th through the 8th. They did include landlines as well as cell phones, and this particular vendor pointed out the value of capturing residents who had cell phones that might have an area code for a different area. Basically the questions that we sent out, and I sent you them in draft form before we finalized the list with the vendor, were intended to really validate the process that you've gone through. So we clearly are not at this point of having people respond to specific projects or specific funding sources, because we're not that far into the discussion to share that information and have people be able to respond based on knowledge of those issues. But we did want to validate the process we've gone through. So the first question was one that was intended, first substantive question was one that was really intended to see whether people saw this as a quality of life issue. What's interesting about that question is that we didn't initiate this project as a quality of life project. We initiated this as an opportunity to tie transportation to improving our economy, both in the near term and the long term. But despite that, what we found was that more than 44% of the people that responded do see transportation as a quality of life issue. Now you can look at the middle bar and say, but 41% said it's not a quality of life issue, and over 10% said that if they have to pay more, in essence, it could decrease their quality of life. But I think the significance, and I think that in talking to our contractor, the significance of almost 45% feeling it is a quality of life issue suggests that if we expand what we do in terms of not only addressing transportation within these key economic spaces that we've been talking about for most of the last year, to look at other issues related to transportation, that you're within striking distance of getting a majority of the people to feel that this can increase their quality of life. So this is a little bit at this point a glass half empty, half full type of a response, but it does suggest that despite the fact that we aren't attempting at this point to address quality of life, a significant percentage of the respondents felt that it would improve their quality of life. The next several questions really deal with the issues that we've been dealing with for the last year in terms of our methodology. And so the first question related to our methodology was to see whether people agreed with the notion that we should look at optimization. And of course, Gene just talked about optimization in the context of live, work, play. In this question, we talked about a couple examples, improving traffic flow with ATMS technology or improving intersections. And as you can see, 81% of the respondents supported the approach that we're using in terms of looking at the less costly and faster approaches to dealing with transportation. The next question followed our methodology in terms of we recognize that there's a limit to how far you can go in terms of optimizing our existing infrastructure investments, and so it looks at the issue that we've been facing of addressing congestion in these key economic spaces. And this question introduces, of course, we had to take out some of our terminology and use wording that people might better understand. And so we approached the concept of key economic spaces here. And we identify that if you move from optimization to capacity building, They are more costly projects and they take more time, but 73% of the people that responded to the survey also favored that approach. Moving on, in terms of our methodology, we recognize that we can't build ourselves out of the situation we have. As we've gone through each of the key economic spaces, we've pointed out that we can mitigate some of the increase in congestion between now and 2026, but we need to look at other solutions. And so improving our investment in transit is one of those approaches that we've been discussing, and as you've heard today, it's going to be more of the discussion next month as we start to pull more of that together. But we had a very strong level of support here. 82% of the people that responded to the survey were supportive of expanding choices as we talked about different options related to transit. And I'm going to come back to this because we have a cross-reference question that I think is particularly relevant. And then the other thing we've been talking about is innovation. We're looking at job creation and having people want to come here. Last summer you heard some of the large employers in the community talk about the value of having something that will attract, I think a lot of the references have been younger workers. But here what we saw, giving some examples of the types of innovative projects that have been discussed and describing them in terms that we hope that the public would understand. So we didn't use the term intermodal center, but we talked about the concept. Again, we had more than 70% of the survey respondents supportive of being able to compete against other communities for jobs and employers by introducing some innovative approaches, and so we named 4 of those. Now, the one thing about this question, we did have one survey respondent say, I would have liked to have voted each one up or down, but I think that particular, and I've communicated with that individual, I think the key is some people may know enough about these projects to have an opinion on specific projects. In general, I don't think that we're at the point where we've discussed publicly enough the ferry project or toll lanes or the intermodal center or the first segment of a rail service to have people really be able to answer that question. So that is the type of information that would come out, as Herb said, when we come back with a specific project list and we're able to talk about funding sources. At that point, I think we're in a position to ask people to be much more specific in terms of what types of projects they would support. Now, one thing that we did was to ask the survey firm to look at kind of cross-validation. And so one thing that they did point out is that of the 1,100 respondents, 677 responded consistently across the 2 questions that really tied into our job centers or key economic spaces and the whole notion of transportation to improve the opportunity to attract and retain employers. And so 61% or 677 of the respondents consistently supported both of those. And then I mentioned one thing that we put in here, and really having looked at the Polk County survey, was we asked people their level of usage of transit. And what came out is something that I think comes out fairly consistently. It certainly came out in Polk County, and that is there are a lot of people that don't use public transit, but they're supportive of public transit and other transportation options. And so while about 71% of the people that responded indicated that they don't use it at all, if you look at the cross-tabulation, you'll see that those people were still very supportive, as you've seen from the other data, of the various types of transportation solutions, including expanding transit services. I'd be glad to stop and answer questions that you might have.
Commissioner Merman?
That last graph just verifies what I've said all along. If we don't produce options that will attract the choice riders to increase our ridership, we'll be just shifting riders from one mode to another mode. And it will not be cost effective for us to do that. So linking the employment centers is critical. And getting those choice riders to get on a better mode of transportation and getting them less dependent on their cars. I think that's a critical where juncture of where we need to go with this when we're considering next month our options.
Chairman Sharp, Commissioner Chris, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Christ.
You know, I concur with that, and I'll take it a step further. I don't think this, while this poll answers some important questions, it really doesn't probe as far as we need to go. I mean, this last number here, you know, while it is alarming, doesn't surprise me. And, you know, I really think it would be to our best interest as we move forward and we plan and we begin to prioritize that we understand better the attitudes of the people we serve towards transportation and why they chose not to use mass transportation and what would it take to move them in that direction. And that will give us an idea, because no matter what we do, you know, if we're going to add on to roads, maybe it's not as important, but if we're looking at other multimodal modes of transportation, we're going to need for them to be cost effective. And that means we're going to need ridership. And what's it going to take, other than building it, to get people to use it? Because this last number doesn't tell me that if we build it, they'll use it.
Chairman Sharp?
But did you say, when you're talking about the crosstabs, a majority indicate they have not used it, not at all, but that you also indicated that if it was available, or that if it was something that they considered viable, they would consider using it. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that they'll use it. What they're suggesting is that they're supportive of all modes of transportation. So what you see, if you look at the cross-tabulation, that people that identify that they don't use transit are supportive of building roads, they're supportive of offering more alternatives in terms of innovation, they're supportive of expanding transit
I
opportunities.
mean, my kids would say they don't use transit. We went to Chicago, we did not use transit.
Sure.
There was no conversation about the transition from one to the other. One was available. And it was not just available, it was something that you wanted to use. My frustration with our current transit system, and I think we're addressing it now, is that it wasn't designed for the choice rider.
Sure.
It was designed as the last option when you had no other option available. And when you build a system designed for that purpose, you exclude your choice riders, and to the point of even economic development. When you don't design it in a way that intends to get you there when you leave your home and you need to be at work as soon as possible, not to meander and get there in an hour or two, well, then you've excluded your choice. You've excluded those who have options. You redesign it, and the numbers will change, because we've seen it empirically across the country.
Commissioner Merman?
Thank you. And to complete my comments I made a couple meetings ago about engaging the business community in our next survey and making sure we get out to the major employers, having that app that they can send out to all the employees in their firms, asking them critical questions, see what will move them to take some kind of level of transit from their job to their home or to park and ride. So I think that the next level of public engagement's got to go deeper into the business community, and they've got to really, I hope they'll step forward, the Chamber of Commerce, and help us do that.
Commissioner Beckner?
Thank you. And I think part of it also is it's a cultural shift, as I have often spoken to. Even when the system is up and running and they have different choices, it's going to take some time to shift cultures and shift attitudes. Because down in this segment and where we're at, as we've discussed, the people really haven't had the choices. And the choices that are there aren't very convenient, and they don't provide convenience to people wanting to use them. So it will take some time, and it'll take a culture shift as well, too.
If I can go back to Commissioner Merman's comment, we did coordinate with the Chamber of, the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce, and at one point we thought they were going to replicate this survey and push it out to employers. They ultimately decided to do their own survey, and I don't believe they've done one yet, but But we didn't miss the message of trying to work with the business community. And certainly as we go to greater detail about projects, that's certainly intent is to get out and get the response from the business community.
Eric, is anyone here from the chamber? I think I thought we were all collaborating and working together on this issue, and I think one of the problems we've had in the past is that everybody's kind of off doing their own thing, and I thought we were going to work together and collaborate. So I guess will appeal to the business groups out there. Please work with us. Don't be off doing your own thing, and so we can get good traction and good information that we can base our decisions off of.
Any other questions or comments, Derek? Thank you.
Thanks.
If I can ask the managers to come up and take the chairs up here. In our last meeting, you charged your managers with having some substantive conversations about the governance approach, and that has occurred. And we'd like to have a conversation about that. Mr. Merrill will lead the conversation off, and then we'll take it from there. So.
So we've talked a lot about governance, and there's no need to spend a lot of time going over the concept, but you did ask us for some specific recommendations, so I'll start there. I think we've all agreed, believe we've all agreed, that we do need some governance entity without getting into, for the moment, who that is, where they are, where they live. So I'm making that assumption that that's where we're starting. And then we go to the next question, which is, how do we go about doing that? It's based on a further assumption that really the purpose behind this is to identify an agency that can really integrate and bring together a transportation solution for the entire Hillsborough County area, and that addresses congestion relief, economic development, and encourages transit ridership, multimodal transit ridership, emphasizing, as was said before, the choice rider. So given that we're looking for someone who can really knit this all together, because we're talking about a multimodal system, and can really take transit to the next level, we as a manager group recommend that the path of least resistance, not only the path of least resistance, but also the best choice in terms of success outcome, is to repurpose an existing agency or entity. And for us, we believe that HART is that agency that would be the best choice to repurpose. And the rationale really is pretty simple, although the execution's always complicated, but really the rationale is simple. What you've seen in terms of project selection, recognizing there is a rail component that does take time, the initial thrust is bus, rapid transit, circulated bus. Bus is really the foundation because it gets you the quickest bang for your buck as you evolve to a more of a rail type system. We've seen that in places all over the country. I mean, MARTA, you can look at any of the big systems that deliver multimodal transportation. Most of them start as bus systems. HART is currently recognized as the existing federal grantee agency, so that's a huge thing given that we're going to need a lot of federal dollars to help us through this. And we believe that the structure of the board, or structure of the charter rather, allows for easy integration without having to get legislative approval at the state level for the most part. So in terms of obviously rebranding is a part of this, but I mean, renaming and so forth perhaps, but rather than get into that, the mission is really to work, as you heard, with FDOT on an intermodal center, for example, to work with the Expressway Authority. The Expressway Authority builds lanes. We're not talking about an agency that builds lanes. We're talking about an agency that puts transit on those lanes so that a managed lane, hot lane, can be more effective. So this is an agency that will work with other important agencies, but will be recognized both within the county and from outside the county as the tip of the spear. And so it can also then function as a regional partner very easily working with other counties. So they have someone they know they can talk to who's really got their hand on the throttle. We talked about a more comprehensive public transit system, and also a key to this is the federal government can't pay for all of it. You know, there's a lot of competition for New Start's money. We can't possibly pay for all of it, and so the public-private partnership, transit-oriented development, whatever you want to call it, is going to be huge. The private sector, as we all know, corporate America loves to have certainty. They like to know who their partner is. They like to know that partner has the authority, it has the wherewithal, it has the governance to execute. If they know that that's the case, they will be good partners. They will be willing to put up risk capital. That's what we need. The structure then of this newly repurposed agency is one that, you know, obviously you all will have to discuss and decide, but again, you asked for our recommendation, and we believe that the handoff is critical, as I've said before. The vision, the accountability in terms of those who are going to be asked to tax themselves perhaps, or pay fees, or whatever it's going to be to help pay for this. Really, I think the comfort level for them is to see all of you on this board of the repurposed agency, even if it's a transitional board. So kind of going to the side here a little bit, by way of example, you know, a year and a half ago when Mayor Buckhorn and Sandy Merman and I and Guy King and Todd Lewicki and others took a look at the homeless agency that we had here and really determined it was not working the way it should, and decided it needed to be repurposed. And it wasn't on mission. And, you know, it made sense to us not to create a new agency, but to take the best of what there was and repurpose it. And in that instance, a tough decision had to be made. Those who were sitting on the board of the Homeless Coalition, under their own rules, had to dissolve themselves. That was a difficult decision, but they took the high ground. They understood that for the community, for the homeless clients, they would be willing to step aside, allow a transitional board to come in, to repurpose, recreate, knit together all the homeless services. That's the same thing we're talking about here. I think it's a model that is relevant, and we now, a year and a half later, have a strong board that has a mission. We've completed a point-in-time count. We're on the verge of hiring a strong leader that's succeeded before elsewhere in a model community. That's what we're talking about here. So if you all were, in my scenario, to become the transitional board of the repurposed HART, I've asked Chip Fletcher, who probably knows more about HART than anybody, to look at what, under the existing rules, again, we don't want to have to go to the state because being nimble and being agile is really important. Could that happen? And yes, it can. So if you were all then to step up and take new seats over there, you could do that. 7 county commissioners, 3 mayors. And the 2 existing gubernatorial appointments would have to remain because that would take a change at the state level. But for now, if we just say that's good because we need the state to have a voice, maybe you would all want to ask the governor to maybe appoint someone else. I don't know, but that is not really the point. The point is, how can we get to the goal line more quickly with as few obstacles as possible? The other thing we asked Chip is, could there be proportional or weighted voting if this group were to become the new board? And the answer is yes, even without appointing any additional members, because we do have, obviously, just in raw numbers, an unbalanced mix. We have 7 county commissioners and 3 mayors. So could, for example, the city of Tampa have 3 votes that Bob would execute, or that the mayor would execute, without having to appoint others? And the answer is yes, as well as the mayors of the other cities. So I just picked 3. I just, I don't
4 or 5 if you'd like.
or 2. And the same goes for Mayor Chalura and Mayor Lott, who's not here. So I think, or Vice Mayor Lott. So I think all of the ingredients are there. All the tools are there. It can be done. It can be done quickly because I think this is important to do quickly. If, in our imaginations, we're talking about a referendum in November of 16, That ain't that far off when you consider it takes a good solid year to have a good education program for folks to know who's going to execute this, have you all being out there in front with us selling this. So, you know, kind of moving the clock forward, by the end of this year, I think that new board needs to be seated. They need to have a strong interim while they're doing a search. It needs to be doing, executing short-term wins. And so this model gets us there quickly. Chip is here, by the way, if you have any specific questions. I am not here to practice law, even though I love to do that. Organizationally, you know, I could put up a chart, but, you know, really what we're talking about is customer-focused delivery, which means we don't abandon the customers we have, we give them a better experience.
Exactly.
We then reach out to a new population of riders and entice them in various ways. And this is not magic. It's not something that we have to start all over again from the beginning. It's been done elsewhere. We then need to execute the spine network and the spine that's been described, because that is the integrated system. That is the backbone that needs to tie to a new bus rapid transit system, a new managed bus system, and to rail. There's of course, the finance administration, but then there is a key transit-oriented development P3 unit that interfaces with the private sector. Those are the four main groups. In terms of planning services, what we recommend is that this agency, repurposed agency, contract with the MPO to do its planning, so that there's a clear interface. The MPO, Ray and his folks have been involved in this. Again, the handoff's critical. Don't need to restart with a whole new group. So basically that's what we're looking for, a CEO, robust CEO that's done this before. My philosophy is always find someone who succeeded before, who's not looking for a job, and bring them over here and, you know, let them help us as well. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's obviously discussion that you'll want to have amongst yourselves, but
Commissioner Beckner?
Thank you, and thank you all for giving us your input. That's exactly what, at least what I've been looking for and been waiting for, is the options and what you think are the best routes to go. What would be then, if this group decided that that was a route to go, what are the steps that we would need to do? Obviously, the current existing HART board, I would imagine, would have some input into all this. How would all this transition, how do you envision it?
I'll ask Chip to come up and answer some of that. Obviously, the first decision would be for this board to say, yes, this is what we want to do, and then secondly, to sit down with the existing board and have that discussion. And some of that, you know, could be one-on-one with them, but clearly there needs to be an engagement. You know, as I used the example before of a homeless coalition, I mean, there's no easy way to do it when you're asking a board to dissolve themselves, but you just need to sit down and come to a common understanding, and you know, I believe for the good of the community, you know, that can happen. Once that's done, once there's an agreement, then there are probably some legal steps that need to be taken that Chip can talk about, but then that just becomes, how do you dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure that it gets done correctly, and then holding your first meeting as the new transitional board of a revitalized or re-engineered Heartline. At that point, you would have to then begin adopting a plan for short-term engagement, short-term wins, leadership issues, I mean, all of the nuts and bolts of how you actually begin to execute. But then, of course, the most important thing is, how do we begin engagement with the public, people we serve, to deal with the issues of funding, service, that kind of thing, and that's a longer-term process. So,
Mr. Chairman, sir.
Well, first thing, I mean, I'd say if we could start tomorrow, we spent a year and a half, not quite a year and a half, talking about how we tie economic development and quality of life to transportation and transit. And the challenge that we face is that the old HART wasn't designed for that. And we've had very frank conversations about the purpose of HART and how it's designed to provide, again, transportation for those citizens who, quite frankly, don't have any other alternative. You stated it very clearly. Now our mission is to continue to provide that service, but at a higher level, but at the same time, achieve what this committee's been doing for the last year and a half, which is to have an entity which is focused on how we're going to improve our economy. And you can't do that if you've got two separate boards, and oftentimes the communication from what we're doing here and what they're doing over there doesn't make the leap. And if we're serious about catching up, and we're serious about competing, and we're serious about getting this done, what you do is you have this board, of which many members have served on HART and understand and are very sensitive to the existing mission of HART, but you'd have new members who could then actually accomplish some of the other projects, because I think we've all talked about how you can't, roads and transit are tied together.
Yes,
We've always treated them separately,
right.
and it doesn't work separately.
No.
Down to when you build a road, if you build a road and the transit guys come in and try to collapse transit on top of it, you have a road that's slow every time the bus stops. But if you work it together, you might have bays, because now you're planning them together. So my hope would be, even though I know there's a lot of detail we have to work through, that we would move and demonstrate clearly, not just to this community, but to everyone out there, that we're serious about getting this stuff done.
And the good thing is there are models. I mean, you know, I would love to be able to do here what I did when I worked in Europe, which is get up in the morning, get on transit, get downtown to work on the bus. That
Exactly.
means roads, it means taxis, it means the whole thing being knitted together. You look at Switzerland, you look at Germany, I mean, they've done it before. This isn't, you know,
Rocket science.
brain surgery. It's just having the governance, it's having the people. And I will say Catherine Egan is an excellent interim CEO.
I agree.
I mean, it's just been night and day. I mean, not to say anything bad about the previous director, but it has been a pleasure, and I think she
Thank
gets
you.
it. You know, and so if you were predisposed, I think you also have someone who can help you get there in the interim and maybe permanently. I'm
I
not
agree.
recruiting for her, but I'm just saying, I mean, all the pieces are there. It's not like you have to build this from scratch, so.
Checks in the mail, Mike.
I know, thank you.
Commissioner Beckner,
And I think
Commissioner Chris.
how you get there, Commissioner Sharp, is, or there's 2 points. You do need to have the right leader that's in place in the organization. And we talked about, as a HART board, needing to know what the direction of the policy leadership group is going to be. But the second point, you know, we talked about what the board would look like. If this board is going to be the governance board that'll make the decision, I think that's fine. But to complete that full circle, to make sure that we're getting all the people at the table, I think we need to be able to resemble, the board needs to be able to resemble something like MPO, where we have all of the, and have a thorough conversation about who needs to be sitting there as ex officio or sitting around our table, whether it's FDOT and the MPO itself, all of the major organizations that are involved with planning transit or transit-related projects need to be part of the conversation and be part of the new board in some capacity.
Did you consider that issue of ex officio members?
Yes, cannot be accomplished under the existing charter, but that doesn't mean you can't have them in effect doing what you're suggesting. I mean, whether you call them ex officio or not, what you want is you want them there by your side, not voting, but you want them
At the table.
at the table. So I think it's just a matter of labels and so forth. But Chip, we did ask Chip to look at that, and you cannot actually appoint them as ex officio.
So, but we could create some type of
Advisory group.
advisor or whatever it is.
Yeah. Being sensitive, though, to the fact that, you know, at some point, the new CEO, you know, will want to have, will not want to have other CEOs between him or herself and his board, or her board. So how you do that is a little bit tricky, but at least initially, I think you can get to where you want to be.
Commissioner Christ?
Thank you. You know, in our last few discussions in this area, I've been a little bit critical about the prospects of HART under the current structure of HART, because I viewed them as, you know, actually administering transportation, you know, running the buses. And I looked at this as a broader, more planning, more strategical board in operation.
Yes.
And I think you listened very well, and you came back with a hybrid where, you know, we're capitalizing on the structure and the staff and the support and the budgets. We're not having to go through the headaches of battling the legislature. I think you navigated these rocks about as safely as you could. A few areas I'd like to touch on. The first one is the advisory. I agree. We need to have that brain power and access to those areas of information and critical thinking among us. Having advisor support staff or advisor support members of the board, voluntarily sit around the table so that they can be included in the discussion isn't something that has to be legislated. And we can draw upon them and include them in the decision making. They just won't have voting power. I'm glad to see that you brought the MPO in here. I don't have any of the paperwork before me today. I think that accidentally I got 2 surveys and not this portion of the presentation, so I'm doing it off of memory from our meeting. But you used the MPO instead of the Planning Commission. For me, either one, but one of the 2 of them needed to be in this mix because they're strategic planners. And they've got access to the data, and that's just their way of thinking, and that's their way of approach, and that needs to be part of this critical mix. So the other part of this is the weighting system. I fully agree, Mayor, that there needs to be a weighting system in the voting structure here. We've got 7 county commissioners. We represent 100% of the population in our boundaries. We then should take a look at each of the 3 cities, give them a weight based on their percentage of the population in the county. And, ultimately the city of Tampa, then the city of Temple Terrace, and then the city of Plant City, and collectively the 3 of you still won't have the number of votes as the county because there's a number of folks that live in the unincorporated area. But truthfully, that would be the fair way of doing this. And that would be something that had to be monitored on a regular basis as those numbers shift and change. This next one, Mayor, is probably going to make your day, and I'm the last person that anyone here would expect to say this, but in the spirit of being objective and wanting to do the right thing, I'm looking at another component that's missing here, and one that I think could possibly, depending on how we structure it, be a valuable player in this multi-intermodal mix. And as we look at the public-private partnerships, they are the private sector component that connects this spine. And I'm wondering if, as we begin to mold this, it wouldn't be a safe home for the PTC.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be structured in a way where
Can we vote now?
this board isn't having to do.
Yeah, we're ready.
I'm meeting with Uber after this meeting, and that begins those discussions. I've already met with Lyft. But no, in the spirit of wanting to do the right thing, and looking at the valuable services that agency does provide, and the level of service that this county enjoys that no other county has in the state, and wondering, well, as we look at building this spine and the components of this spine that connects, the grassroots of this are our cabs and our one-on-ones, because they're ultimately going to get you into that niche that you're having to go to.
Exactly.
And they should be, in some way, shape, or form, included in a way where they're connected in this bigger picture. The concern I would have in doing that is I wouldn't want to see us lose the public safety safeguards that are in place, and I wouldn't want to see this board at this level having to deal with the minutia of whether Johnny Joe gets his license reinstated or do you get your medallion. I mean, those are decisions that could be made from a board under us.
Yeah. It's
But I would be willing as
contractually.
chairman to work with staff to look at a possibility that could be a maybe. And
Yeah.
what the options, pro or con, would be.
Yeah, initially it could be a contractual relationship, and it solves.
Mayor, did I just make your day?
No, yeah, it was good.
That's a
I
great.
I mean, for the right reasons. I think it makes sense to
I'm sorry.
house all of the transportation components and under the same.
It does solve the first mile, last mile problem, which is always the toughest. And for those who, want that choice, to have it integrated even contractually in terms of service and standards and all that kind of stuff, it completes the system.
Because you're talking to taxis, the limos, any of the other single modes of transportation, which are critical in looking at the bigger picture.
Commissioner Beckner?
All right, so then, from my understanding, what you all need from us then is direction that we like Hart to be repurposed, and you would all, if upon our acceptance of this, we'd come back and would have further discussions of what that structure would look like. We could start really getting down into the minutia, how to get the board established.
I mean, yeah, we'd bring back to you an item by item, event by event kind of checklist or procedure for how you get from, today to that point in time, if that's what you would like, yes.
All right, well, I think it's time that we move, and I would move that we accept HART as the governing agents and that we would direct the staff to begin bringing us back the suggested models on how to repurpose HART to be the gogoverning agency.
Movement and a second.
Yeah, we have a motion by Commissioner Beckman and seconded by the mayor of the city of Tampa.
Do we have a quorum?
Mr. Jim, do you want to include as part of that discussion what Commissioner Chris referenced with the PTC?
I think we should. I think that's a very interesting concept. I want to make sure that it doesn't bog us down now, but certainly I think that's that's the right component and the right approach to take.
And I guess we don't have a Mr. Chairman, do we? My only concern here is, again, I've been critical about HART being the lead agency here. I want some comfort language in that motion that assures me that HART isn't going to be the controlling agent, that they're only going to be a component of this as we work towards a hybrid.
Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they'd be like
I think what we're talking about is repurposing HART as it is, as we know it today, and staff will come back with a proposal on how that structure would look like and the pieces and components of what we'd need to do that.
Okay.
We're talking about a heart transplant.
A heart transplant into a bigger body.
I think what you need is you need
All day
the
long.
language in there that will establish how we do these contractual relationships with these with MPO, PTC. How would you do that? Because it'd be the same for all of them.
It kind of looks like this, where the transit operations, HART, Commissioner Chris, is what you're talking about, becomes a component of a larger multimodal, multi-purpose organization, so that I think, it's a little difficult because of the nomenclature, but I think what you're saying is what we were envisioning. Because it isn't just a bus system anymore, it sounds like a commercial.
Well, if I may, they would fit in on that line, just like HART fits in on that line as an independent agency, but within the jurisdiction of this bigger picture.
We're working on a project. When you leave here, we got a project that I've been dealing with for the last few months, that Ms. Egan and others are involved in, where we're trying to come up with a way of providing a shuttle service from the airport to the West Shore to downtown. Even in there, though, there were questions, and we haven't even gotten to them yet, about the PTC and how that might work. If we have one entity that's dealing with all the problems, it will help us tremendously as we try to move these projects through, because now you'll have them right there at the table.
Right.
And
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example, because that one includes all four of these boxes. You've got the traditional transit portion because it's bus, but you've got some spine network issues, and you've got planning needs from MPO, and there's a P3 opportunity. So, for example, what if we don't want to buy the buses? What if we want to actually
Exactly.
contract with someone to provide the buses and run the system, because it's a unique, so I mean, it really is a nice way to use that as an illustration.
If I may, it would be just one more box on that second line there next to,
Right here.
Right there.
PTC. Yeah, right there. You can see them.
And it provides for those who are from the cab drivers to others, this is going to be good for them, because you're going to see an increase in demand.
Yeah.
Well,
and gentlemen,
and I'll ask, I mean, if I understand the charter for HART correctly, it's actually the Hillsborough Transit Authority. And HART is what, the operating name?
It's doing business as, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that kind of, I think, might help in the structural part of it if we're going to call ourselves that, and then HART is a contractual relationship with us. Is that how you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so our decision today will be the statement to the world that we're going to take over transportation, solve it, and be held accountable for it, right? Through this new structure?
Think so?
Okay.
If
Just
you
wanna
make
make
that
sure.
statement.
I mean, we can vote today on that. Do we need Plant
think you
City
can.
here?
Well, the only thing that I don't know what type of conversations you all have with Plant City, because obviously it's always been, I think, a goal that they need to be included, but we have to address the financing component of how they're paying into or suggesting they're going to pay into the system, considering that they don't contribute ad valorem-wise to the current system.
Yes, and we've had some conversations with them. They do want to be part of it. And then that gets into the nitty-gritty of how do they pay, and it's doable, it's workable. There's nothing that they've said has indicated they would not at all want to be part of this, that they do want to be part of it, so.
Why don't we, I hate to do this, but I think we should vote on this motion. There's going to be a lot of detail we can work through, but let's vote on this motion, because I think this is big, and I want to thank Commissioner Christ for your suggestion and others. But we do have a motion by Commissioner Beckner. It was seconded by the mayor, and it includes the recommendation made by Victor Christ. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
So then next meeting, can you all maybe come back with a high 30,000 level foot blueprint of a roadmap on what we can expect to go down this road and the decisions we need to make timeline wise, and kind of put together that map
And
for
I think
us?
Catherine can be helpful in finding a way to create the bridge to the existing board for that discussion, and that'll be part of that.
And if I just one comment, speaking of night and day, a lot of the comments that this group came up with today, we heard this morning out at West Shore. Chris Weber and I were meeting with Blooming Brands. It's 900 employees, the corner of terrible traffic and horrific traffic. And when we went in to talk to them about transit, we got the recruiters and some key staff, but out of 900 people, they couldn't get enough people to come in to talk about transit. It's not that they wanted to drive every day, it's what they were looking for and what they thought they had was not there. And we have to define, what is it that folks want to take? What will get them out of their car? And, it was a big discussion. It was, could you take a vehicle and wrap it with a Blooming Brands and run this from Wesley Chapel or from Brandon or from this? But what was really interesting was, here's a big company, 900 people in a building with 1,500 people total, and they're having a hard time recruiting. They're saying when people are coming in, they're saying, if I move here for a good school and I drive there for work, I'm losing this much time in my life. And their voice isn't in this conversation. So I just want to assure you that your transit agency, we just want to get more folks on transit. We're not mode specific. This is our job, is to carry folks around. So regardless of what else is going on in this room, we're still out there now, talking to folks, beating the bushes, coming up with new ideas and new plans. So transit is still moving forward, not waiting for another big project. We're out there for this night and day shift already.
Thank you.
Commissioner Merman?
Just let me ask you, Catherine, how do you see the construction of the discussion with the current Hart Board? I know we have a workshop plan,
That's
and
what
that
my
took me
answer-
by surprise completely, the subject. So I think they're fully anticipating that this is going to come up. I hate to see their backs get up against the wall without evaluating all the information that we've been presenting here. But do you have a plan?
From the Hart staff perspective, our goal is to get a workshop put together as quickly as possible so the entire board can consider the issue, talk about it, vet it. I can't see this workshop proceeding without the county staff here sharing this process and what has gone on. But you rightly observe, the Hart Board has not had a robust conversation, and it's my responsibility to make sure that that opportunity comes up sooner rather than later.
And I would suggest that you have the managers group, as many people as possible, be at that discussion or workshop to help give factual backup. A lot of them have said, well, we don't want to be in charge of economic development. And this has not been as that much about economic development. It's about jobs and transportation and land use and connecting it all together. Yes, it belongs together. So I guess it's, I hope you'll consider, I hope we will have a very constructive conversation.
I think we'll have a positive conversation. I think it can be very positive.
Mayor Chiller?
Just briefly, when you had the organizational chart up there, where did the board of directors fall on that? Where you showed the CEO and the different... there you go. Where was the board of directors
It
falling?
would be here.
Okay.
So the CEO would be reporting to you all.
Okay. Just a couple of comments of observation. A lot of this is going to fall on the voluntary stepping down of the existing board. I think I can speak for this body, but the board members, I think, have done a good job at Heartline. I mean, they've dedicated a lot of their time. This isn't a vote of no confidence. It's a vote of this is a much bigger picture. The bar is being raised, and we're widening the horizon there. So I think that needs to be a very clear message, because what I don't want is the headlines of the newspaper tomorrow say that, this leadership is a takeover of the existing board. That's not the case. I think it's more of a partnership, and certainly staff is still very engaged, and I don't want to send. I served on the Heartline board as a board member years ago, and I don't want to send the wrong message to these folks. I think that's very, very important, because I think that this meeting began where the climate in this region is great, not like it's been before, and what we don't want is these board members, hopefully there's full cooperation, but for them to get the wrong message and to get it by the headlines in a newspaper tomorrow morning. So I think that's very important. Currently, the voting ratio on the Hart board, I think, is proportionate to the population. I think the county gets 4 or 5 votes, the city gets 3, and then Plain City and Temple Terrace get 1 each. I think that structure somewhere in place, and they're by appointments. Now I believe it'll be more of elected individuals, which is very good, and the credibility is there because the citizens voted you in. They're not looking at the person that your body appointed, looking at the person that they voted in, which I think is very important. But the key point, I think, is the reason for the consideration of the restructure is it's where this region is going, and it involves the intermodal, and economic development. That, I think, is what is key, the message that we need to send to our community and to the Heartline board members. But I want to commend you all, because I know at least you all met with me and probably all the others, and you listened well. Although I know, Mr. Sharp, this has taken a very, very long time. It's really not that long.
We're slow learners.
Considering what the end result is, because I did not come here today anticipating this, this outcome. Not opposed to it. I think it's the right direction, but I think the message needs to be relayed in a manner where it's consistent, it's friendly, and it's better for the region as a whole.
And I see lots
Very
of
well stated. Very well said.
nonverbal agreements with you, so we'll take that as a record of note. This is a vote of confidence about the future, not a vote of no confidence in the board.
Exactly.
Need to go. So, okay.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Well, let me just preview again our June meeting. We'll be presenting to you the first parts of the business plan, which will include all the key economic spaces and what those projects will cost, transit, and a further, more detailed discussion of governance, as you just discussed today. We will allow June and July for those discussions if we need them. There's a lot of content in there. But our plan is, as soon as you give us an endorsement on that business plan, which again will have projects, financing, governance, we'll go out again to a more detailed public engagement process with the business community and the rest of the community. So that's our plan for moving forward with this. Any questions or comments before we close today?
Just wanted to make sure that you talked about the robust engagement with the community, that it is extra robust.
Okay.
Extra robust.
We'll prepare
An extra
have
IPA, an extra robust conversation. Okay.
We'll have some concepts for you in the
We're
June
adjourned.
meeting for that.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Mayor.